The following podcast is a little fiery but mostly peaceful. If you're an automaton, turn away now and shelter in place. If you're a Catholic ready to renew your prescriptions of red pills and white pills, stay tuned. Welcome to Catholics Aren't Zombies. I'm your host, Chris Meneer. Delighted to have you again. Thank you for joining me. You know, I'm wondering why a lot of people these days cannot pull the trigger and make life decisions anymore. They cannot execute a plan. And I think this may be especially true for Catholics, unfortunately. We just can't pull that darn trigger. We get caught in analysis paralysis. We think, we deliberate, we analyze, we review all the data and all the information ad nauseum to infinity. But then we never actually do anything with the information before us. And boy, oh boy, we know darn good and well we got as much information these days as anybody has ever had in the history of humanity. Yet sometimes it just seems like your average Joe, even your slightly above average Joe and Jane, can't make a decision and put it into effect. So that's the problem I want to talk about today, and I'm going to see if we can maybe engineer some solutions to that particular problem. Muster up the courage to actually go out and act, not just be an idea person, not just be paralyzed with all the information. But before I do that, I want to make a distinction between pulling the trigger and being trigger happy. See, it was a few months ago on the Patrick Coffin show. His media operation is called Coffin Nation. It's a very good program. You should check it out on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel, Patrick Coffin. He brings a lot of really good people on for interviews. So one of the ones he did a few months ago, I'll put a link in the show notes, is with somebody by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, a military veteran from the Army, I think. And they had a really good discussion about how, compared to the old days, where if you had a conflict where you had a lot of men on the battlefield, let's say World War II, Vietnam War, when it came to pulling the trigger and actually shooting and attacking the enemy, studies would have shown and experience would have shown that very few men were capable of actually doing it. You'd have maybe 15% of guys that could actually carry out that task. And it's kind of understandable why. You know, it's very counterintuitive to humans to do something that could kill another human, even if it's a sworn enemy, especially if it's some of these stupid conflicts where we don't know why we're doing any of the fighting. But nonetheless, back in the day, it was hard to get a soldier to actually pull the trigger, even if they'd been, the marksman par excellence back in boot camp. But then they contrasted it. Colonel Grossman contrasted this with these days, you've got people playing these video games, these Call of Duties and all these first-person, third-person shooters that has desensitized them to it. And long story short, because of all that, partly because of that and partly because of single motherhood and all sorts of other things that we force upon our poor children these days, our young men are way more likely to go postal. They're way more likely to do a Columbine attack, to do any of these really violent school shootings, and to do any of these really violent public shootings that you just didn't used to have. Of course, people are quick to blame it on the technology, the guns that we have, but we've always had guns one way or the other. It's just since the 90s there's been an explosion in this problem. Colonel Grossman, one of the points he was making is that you could tie it to this proliferation of these really graphic and addictive video games. Now people will pull the trigger and go nuts. But I want to distinguish that from the other way of pulling the trigger, which is making life decisions, which video games haven't done much to engender an improvement in that regard. We are so hesitant to do anything these days, and I think there's so many abundant examples. I'll go through them for you, but I think you'll agree with me. People hesitate, they him-and-haw all day, they never get anything done. Now, maybe if you put it to them like a video game where there was hit points and you could level up and you could get trophies and stuff like the Xbox, maybe if it was like that in real life, okay. But, clearly we don't have that incentive mechanism right now. And you see it, people can't execute a business plan. They can think on it all day. They could say, oh, yeah, I'm going to start a business. This is going to be so great. I'm going to be a millionaire in 2 years. I'm going to open up a bar. I'm going to open up a pet shop. I'm going to start making trinkets and widgets, and everybody's going to buy them, and I won't have to work for Walmart anymore. Oh, they'll talk and talk and they'll deliberate and they'll tell all their buddies. They'll have a beer over it and it'll be some grand, fantastic thing, but then they won't do it. Oh, another great example, writing a book. And I know this from experience that there is a big difference between jotting down a few words and actually completing the task. Everything from writing to editing to formatting, paperback, hardcover, Kindle, audio, and then going out and marketing it or trying to figure out how to get a publisher to take it or whether you're going to self-publish. There's a ton that goes into that. And a lot of people don't realize that up front when they're talking smack about how they're going to write the latest and greatest novel in the micropub with their buddies. So they draw up a big line of smack. But then when they wake up the following day, they don't feel the semi-buzz from having drinking a couple beers. All of a sudden, that motivation disappears. There are other examples even still. Approaching women. Guys will read all there is to read on the internet from the pickup artist or whomever. You shouldn't read any of that junk anymore. All the game stuff. They'll read anything that anybody will tell them on how to approach women. They'll comb their hair real nice. They might even get in the gym and start pumping some iron. They might actually up their game, so to speak. But then they won't actually do it. It's also kind of true for women. It's the same thing, just from the other vantage point. Ask yourself, ladies, do you do everything to make yourself approachable without looking desperate? Fine line there. And that does take effort, and you have to do certain things. You have to change your behavior. You have to change your appearance. You have to dress attractively without dressing immodestly. Again, I'm operating towards a Catholic audience here, so there is, for ladies, a very fine line to toe there. It takes a little brain work, but it also takes putting it into action. And you can't just expect yourself to be approachable without any effort. You can't just be a troll and stare at the ground all the time. Some ladies do that, and then they got the nerve to go online, wah, 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 I can't find a man. This is so oppressive. Where are all the good men? Well, they're off being indecisive losers. That is what it is. But are you doing anything to help on your side of things? Something for everyone, men and women alike, to think about. I already mentioned lifting weights for guys. This one's a little easier. I mean, either you're going to go in and do it or not. It doesn't take that much deliberation, so I think that one speaks for itself. Or how about discerning the priesthood? Now, I'm nobody's spiritual advisor by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a theologian, not a priest myself. I'm not the vocations director in your diocese. But something tells me is if you spend 5 years thinking and thinking, praying and praying, and you've got it on your soul that God has called you to the priesthood, and you still haven't even so much as picked up the phone to call the bishop or call the director or talk to the priest at your parish or somebody you can trust, well, I think you got a problem. You're not pulling the trigger. You have to pull the trigger. Now, you might be wondering, hey, what's the solution to all this? Well, the solution is to just flat out act. It's to stop thinking. It's to stop perhaps listening to podcasts and reading and absorbing information like a sponge. There's nothing wrong with any of those things at all. I'd be out of business if you didn't do that. But it really is just a very simple calculus of one very important factor, and it's you have to freaking act. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Does anybody know what movie that's from? Okay, now I want to suggest one really good way to jumpstart this. Find something, anything, any sort of plan, and just put it into action. Okay. But more specifically, you might want to focus on what you're going to do making money in life, because this chews up a lot of your time, even for the best of us who don't want to chase the paper. I would suggest entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a big deal because it could be the thing that finally gets you to step away from your comfort zone and force you to pull the trigger. Entrepreneurs have to do that nonstop over and over and over again. It's not just you go to work and you rely on things to mostly work for you without any real decision making or risk taking. It'll help you break out of the autopilot mode. So going and working, doing your commute, going in, putting in your 9 to 5, commuting back home, easy in, easy out. There's no risk there. There's very little decision making or execution that has to go into effect. The most nerve-wracking thing you probably do there is interview for the job once you get it. But once you get it, after that, it's like, okay, it's routine for as long as you have that job. Not so if you're an entrepreneur. You got to keep doing it over and over again with every little decision you make, because the business that you create is going to be yours. You own it, and you've got to figure out every little jot and tittle about it. Even if you start to outsource things, you still got to decide how you're going to handle that. I want to read to you an article from somebody who I think kind of makes this point pretty well. He tries to sell entrepreneurship as really it's going to be about your only option pretty soon anyway, for anybody that wants to keep their sanity and doesn't want to be a zombie in the corporate workplace. This is an article from a guy by the name of Aaron Clary. It's called Self-Employ or Die. I'm getting about halfway down it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here we go. I quote from Clary. Of course, a lot of people don't think self-employment is for them. They're not the entrepreneurial type. They like the comfort of working for somebody else. And to that I say tough, because you are operating under the premise that you have a choice. Yes, technically, you do have a choice, but so bad has the employment prospects and employment environment become that it practically forces you into self-employment. However, if you consider the pros and cons of self-employment against traditional employment, it'll hopefully at least make a convincing argument for self-employment and at least provide you the incentive to get into the entrepreneurial mindset. First, you eliminate the issue of reliable employment. You are your own boss, and thus you have your own best interest at heart. You will be the best boss you ever had and will treat yourself better than any boss you will ever have. You will not outsource your job to India. You won't sue yourself for sexual harassment. You won't choose to go another direction when times get tough. Second, mental health. In being your own employer, you won't have to endure the petty baby boomer boss antics of predict my mind or else we'll fire you. Or, I told you this, but I really wanted you to do that. Or, I'm a 20-something brainwashed girl and am offended by everything and will file sexual harassment complaints all the time. Or, my favorite, I know we said your job would be X, but now that you signed a year lease and moved here, it's going to be Y. Close quote. And he gives some other reasons why you should consider entrepreneurship. That last part was pretty prescient. Who hasn't experienced that? Baby boomer bosses, 9 out of 10 times they suck. With both sexes working together, inevitably there's all that sexual harassment crap. These are landmines in your life. So even if you don't have the entrepreneurial spirit and you have a hard time, mustering up that courage to pull the trigger and do things on your own, at least these things, these horrible dispositions in the workplace, there ought to be something to motivate you to want nothing to do with being somebody else's wage slave any longer. It should make you want nothing to do with easy mode and autopilot. You don't want that. Catholics shouldn't want that at all. We're called to do the hard things. It's like St. John of the Cross. Do the hard things, suffer penances, embrace challenge and risk, and that's the only way to kill effeminacy. So why are only crazy, deranged men, the ones that play the video games, able to make decisions these days? Well, it's because we can't really distinguish virtuous men from mama's boys any longer. This has come about, I think, largely because we don't have any galvanizing experiences or difficult routines for men. No boot camp experience for most men anymore. Most men don't join the military, and they don't do anything similar to that. We don't discipline ourselves by waking up early in the morning. And Jordan P. Peterson was right. Make your own damn bed already. You got to have that routine. You got to have something like that, even if it's something petty and seemingly insignificant, to discipline and keep your life structured. If we can't impose structures on our lives ourselves, how are we going to make the big decisions? Of course we're going to want zombie mode. We want mommy to make the bed for us. That's like surrendering your autonomy. I don't know, why would anybody want that? Nobody deep down really wants that, but they succumb to it and they give into it basically because they don't see that there's any alternative, and that's pretty sad. So things like entrepreneurship, taking control of your life, put small things in your life, take them and come up with a plan of action to fix them. So to recap on all this, do hard things, make your damn bed, and pull the trigger in life. Don't be afraid to fail. Be somebody who executes, not just an endless planner. That's the end of the show, guys. Thank you for listening. Hope you got something out of it. Check out all my other podcasts. I've got several episodes built up now. We're doing it 3 times a week. And check out ditchthestateloveholychurch.com. Other than that, y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.